Jack Mitchell, we have reached the end of the Groin Kick Chronicles. The epilogue is here.
The Chronicles are over. We hope the era is over. And we've just established, a historical record of it now. And now we move forward with our lives, with our eras,
yes,
with our football seasons. It's very exciting to kind of get this finalization out of the way, to be honest.
Should we save that question of, is this era over, for the very end of this podcast? Because that's the question that everybody ultimately is going to want answered, aren't they?
Yeah.
Is this thing done?
Yes. And now I'm sure there will be anything that happens going forward, trying to see if it is a continuation of it or if it does symbolize the end of it. So yeah, let's save that as the final analysis of the Groin Kick era.
Perfect. So we'll do that at the very end. I have a couple of things that I've been keeping track of throughout this project that we have not talked about just yet. But one thing that I wanted to dive back into a little bit more as we finish up was something that we did discuss in the episode with the 5 through 1, and that is, was the order ultimately correct? I know that there was a lot of build up to the end of the episodes and to what was ultimately going to be number 1, and we talked about it a lot in the lead up to it. Rivalry games had so much extra weight to them, and that's why 2019 Colorado was the number 1 game. You and I did a bonus episode of the Chronicles recently where all of our subscribers told us stories, and that 2019 Colorado game did show up for a lot of people.
For a road game, it showed up a lot because a lot of the stories we thought might have been attending games, and some people did attend it, but yeah, you're right. I think that sort of vindicated the ranking to some degree when I heard how many people associated events that happened around these games, which I was a little surprised by it, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. And then yet, like in hindsight, I look back at that as kind of a marker for me in time of, wow, how I viewed about Scott Frost and where the program was going pre-Colorado 2019 and post-Colorado. For me, it was pretty much night and day. I still remember doing the post-game show that afternoon, that evening, and just wondering, oh my gosh, is this not what I thought or what we thought this thing was going to be moving forward?
Right. And it had so many of the hallmarks, and in the end, that's kind of how I defined this whole thing, was whether or not it had all of the various hallmarks within it, which is, at some point, you think there's going to be a celebration, and there's not. We talked about that in the last couple of episodes.
Yep.
Had that, right? It was an opponent that you desperately wanted to beat. You had that, right? It was at an important time, a pivotal time within a season and or a career. Both of those were true with this one. And then kind of the individual things that went along with it, right? Some interesting late decision making, special teams issues,
a complete meltdown,
a meltdown. One unit looking really good and then not looking really good. Turnovers. It had so many of those things as well, and a signature groin kick play with the flea flicker.
Yes, it certainly did. You did your own rankings towards the end of this, away from the actual Groin Kick Chronicles podcast, and you ended up having an Iowa game at the top of your rankings, and that was the 2023 Iowa
was what I decided, and I went back and forth a ton on this.
Is that because of the bowl game? Like, I know that you have mentioned that the 2021 game wasn't as painful because it wasn't for bowl eligibility. They only had 3 wins going into that game.
To me, when I thought back of just my own feeling with these games, the ones when I felt the most sick afterwards was when there were no more games to be played, but there could have been afterwards. And so 2019 Iowa, 2023 Iowa were two that fit in that. There might have been another one in there. But yes, that feeling felt particularly sad, desperate, hopeless after the whole thing was over, especially when it was added to the end of a game that otherwise fit the Groin Kick script anyways, which 2023 did to a T.
It really did.
In that game. No, you thought Nebraska was going in to win the game, and in a second, everything changed.
Yeah, I think ultimately, because I haven't given any of my rankings, I've had all of the math in front of me, I've really tried to pull away, and now that the project is over, I feel like I can finally say what I think is the worst, and yet I still go back and forth between a couple, and you just said something where those Iowa games had been for bowl eligibility, and when I think of watching Nebraska football over the years and the losses that usually hurt the most to me, you know what I think of is, Jack, the games where it felt like the program could have made that step forward. I think of like 2006 Texas, always comes to my mind, the snow game, Terrence Nunn, fumbles, and everything changes. Even like a random poll, 2005 Texas Tech, where it felt like that game would have meant something. And so I know that a game that you thought was way too low was the 2021 Michigan game. That was in the 20s. I keep looking down at my sheet right now, and I keep thinking of that 2021 Michigan State game, where that game, the season, it was teetering, right? And I don't know if a win ultimately is going to catapult the Frost era into a different stratosphere or in just a positivity. But that really did feel like one of those kind of last gasps of the Frost era of, can they get a win like this? And I mean, especially when I look at all the math and when I don't consider that it's not a rival, and that game still got all the way up to number 2. I know we talked about it on the last episode, but that was so vital to me, like that we had the non-rivals as high as they could be, and that one in the 2018 Northwestern game of all games were the ones that were able to kind of cut through the rivalry grip that Wisconsin and Colorado and Iowa had that no other matchup was able to do.
Yeah, and I think those are, again, in part because they fit the script so well in terms of how the game went, right? The punt return, obviously, or giving up a lead, or an overtime situation that didn't work out. It fit that. But then it got to the other thing that you were pointing out, at least, especially that 2021 game. And maybe this didn't factor into the calculation, but it's this whole concept of opportunity lost. Right?
Yes.
What is the difference between where a win takes you emotionally, takes the program, consequences that are actually concrete, going to a bowl,
head coach, where's the head coach going?
Loss? Like what? Basically, the floor to ceiling measurement of both outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that was why, for me, the bowl games, the ones that were the final game where you missed a bowl game, that to me was huge. But there could be other ways that could be the case, and a bunch of those games in 2021, I think, are the case because you have the thing that's getting close to a bowl game too, but it's also just like a program so desperate for a little bit of momentum at that point. And if they got it felt like, whether it was that Michigan State game, especially that Michigan game is another one, which I think was ranked way too low because of that as well.
Because it felt like they lost out on something
and
that night.
That probably shows that formula wasn't complete. That wasn't completely baked in our formula, because I felt like that 2021 Michigan, the floor, the distance between the floor and the ceiling in the way you would have felt after that game, almost as big as any game that we've had.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, it's easy sometimes to look back at some of the opportunity lost, if you will, of like a national championship loss, obviously, a conference championship loss, maybe a division championship in the old era. And what's interesting about this project is, outside of 2016, they were never in contention for anything. I mean, bowl games, yes, but they were never in division contention. In the first era, or the first year of the 18-team Big Ten era, they were obviously not in contention for anything there. And so that is what kind of made this project really, really interesting, is opportunity lost so often was kind of that feeling, right? That you always describe it as that you should be with me right now. That's what I think of, the celebration that you've had planned for so many of these games. And that is what we are talking about in a lot of these matchups. And that Michigan game certainly fits that. The Michigan State game that year, it certainly fit that. But there aren't really a whole lot of those that are away from the Black Friday Iowa loss that kept him from bowl eligibility.
Yeah. Another way to think of it, I suppose. And I think a little bit of that just goes with who the opponent is, right? Like
100%.
That's Colorado game. That's what I think amps up that Colorado game too, it's because of them. But, you're more exuberant about it, not only because it's a win at that point, but it's at Colorado and you turned the stadium red. And I think maybe the metric should be called fireworks left intact. Okay, like how many in Lincoln and Omaha? You know how it happens sometimes.
Oh,
It'll always happen in East Lincoln at least. A big. In fact, that 2021 Michigan game we were watching on my porch. I had projected it. And I was, because of YouTube or the projector or something, we were about, as seems to always be the case, we were about 30 seconds behind. And so every good play that Nebraska had got spoiled by fireworks in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I think we could make a metric that after the game when fireworks goes off, it should be fireworks saved, because sort of measuring the glee and the joy and the celebration that would have happened that you didn't end up
that you
getting.
lost out on.
Yes.
A question that I wrote down for this final episode was, what have we learned? I wanted to kick that off by asking you, if you were to guess which of the seasons, and we have 11 seasons worth of games that we were able to cover in this project, because we did do the 2014 bowl game. So it's really 10 seasons all told. Which one do you think had the highest ranking in terms of the groin kick rating?
For an entire season?
For an entire season's worth of losses.
Either, right off the top of my head, I want to say 2015 or 2021.
All right, so here's what's interesting. 2021, which we have held up for years now, 4 years later, as like the worst of the worst, actually came in at number 6.
Well, we did have the Michigan game rated incorrectly, so that would have made it better. But
you said, the other one you said was 2015?
Yeah.
That was number 2. 7 losses, those averaged 39.17 on the groin kick scale. Number 1 was Matt Rule's first year.
Oh, 2023. Yeah,
2023.
That would have been my third one that I would have guessed. So those 3 would have been my 3.
If you look, Jack, at the top 20 onward, number 20 was actually a 2023 game of all games. That had the average, that was a 39.90 on the groin kick scale. The average for the 2023 losses, they had 7 losses that year, was 40.80. So on average, the 2023 losses were top 20 losses. And that shows up time and time again. Michigan State 23, Maryland 23. So we're already looking at 2. Obviously the opener versus Minnesota, the Wisconsin game, the Iowa game. Those games were all in the top 20. And so what have we learned? As bad as the Scott Frost era was in the 2021 season seemed to be, as horrible of a start that the Mike Riley era got off to, the Matt Rule era, surprisingly, has gotten off to a more heartbreaking start, because number 3, Jack, is the 2024 season in terms of average rankings for an entire season.
So the Rule era has the majority of the top 4, the plurality of the top 4 seasons.
Yes.
In this.
Yeah. Like, by far.
Wow. And
does that make you feel good?
Yeah, I don't know. When's the first Frost season then?
The first Frost season is number 4. That's 2019.
2019.
Yeah. So the rankings, if you were wondering seasons, and this is, again, the average ranking of each loss. The top ranked season in terms of worst was 2023. Number 2 was 2015. Number 3 was 24. Number 4 was 2019. The 2016 season was ranked 5th. 2021 season was ranked 6th. The 2022 season was ranked 7th, which makes sense because that was a lot of blowouts, though there was some heartbreak in there. 2018 was ranked 8th. 2017 was ranked 9th. And Jack, you know what? 2020 was ranked 10th, and I feel like that fits so well because we have jokingly said throughout this entire project, man, you kind of forget about the 2020 season. And the math says, actually, yes, that game was the most palatable of all the seasons, which kind of is funny because in the moment it was hell.
Right. And it matches, the rest of it matches too, because 2017 you checked out pretty quickly. Fairly soon. 2022, obviously, at some point you checked out and you had to switch to Mickey Joseph as well. And so the context around those seasons makes sense as well. Plus, early seasons in a coach's career as well, right? Those 2015, 2023, and 2018, which wasn't in the very top, you said, but that would be there as well. And so that kind of matches the context of where those coaching tenures were, basically.
I in a way, I couldn't believe it. And then on the other hand, I was like, you know what? I mean, you close your eyes and you think about some of the losses that they've had over the last 2 years. We've been quoting the stat throughout much of the offseason. They're 3-10 in one-score games in the Matt Rule era, so I guess it does fit pretty well.
But isn't that crazy too? In that top 4, you've got all 3 coaches represented. You've got both decades represented. It truly was. This isn't really extrapolating what happened over 2 years, over a decade. This truly was a decade of it happening fairly regularly.
Yeah. The other thing that I would answer, hey, what have we learned? Kind of going off what you just said. This is a system problem. This is not I think it was very easy in the Scott Frost era to say, this is what they do. They lose all these one-score games.
Right.
But then you go back a little bit further, and going through that the 2015 season, I learned, or I maybe was reminded, oh, wow, that was really, really bad. The reaction coming off of that episode was pretty interesting because it was basically, yikes. I kind of had buried a lot of the 2015 heartbreak, but it happened. And Jack, it happened like week after week after week. Like there was the beginning of the season, it was BYU, and then it was Miami, and then it was Illinois, and then it was Wisconsin.
Right.
In the first, 6 games of the season.
In that 10 to 20 episode that we did.
Yes.
That was just...
It was literally
like
4 games in a row at one
calendar,
point. Yeah.
Which is just crazy. Yeah, how about this? Little vindication for Scott Frost. He isn't even...
Shout out.
He's number 3 in terms of the individual seasons of all the coaches who are involved in this. The least likely.
Absolutely incredible.
With this. Yeah, which you wouldn't have expected going in either.
Yeah.
Because that's the reputation around him, but it's just as true of the other guys.
100%. It absolutely is true of the other guys. The top 10 featured 2 games from 2018, 1 game from 2019, 2 games from 2021, 1 game from 2022. That was a Mickey Joseph game. 3 from 2023, and 1 from last year. Of course, that was Iowa. So 0 Mike Riley games in the top 10. Now, 4 of them were in the top 15, and again, they were all back-to-back-to-back. But I found that kind of intriguing as well as an idea that the Matt Rule era, he has coached the fewest games of any of these coaches, and yet he had 40% of the top 10.
One of the things that's fascinating to me, and I don't know that we have an answer to this, is I think I, at least, have always had an assumption in my head that once Nebraska ends up on the winning side of a few of these games that are close, that fit this script, but they flip the script, when they do that a time or maybe multiple times, that is going to be what lessens the likelihood of this continuing, right? Just kind of a mental
learning how
thing.
To win, right?
Yeah, but even though we had, I don't know that we ever had any real lulls in terms of groin kick games. Did we ever, was there ever a time where it looked like they were going to get out of it, right?
Like a stretch?
Yeah, like where either they, some of it was they were getting blown out all the time, like 2017, so it was a little bit less so. But even if you factor in the wins, right? Was there ever a time, and I know we didn't delve into the wins, we'll
do that someday.
We'll do that someday, but I do wonder if there was a period, what was the closest that it looked like Nebraska was ever coming out of this period? It probably was maybe the beginning of obviously in 2016, Mike, I was going to say on a run, but you felt like you didn't really know it was a thing yet. Then, even
and it kind of felt a little fool's goldy, right? And especially in hindsight, we look back on that season and we say, well, they beat a lot of bad teams.
I just don't think the groin kick, even though we didn't know, I don't think we knew we were in that era yet. So that it has to be a little bit later. Maybe the beginning of the season in 2024, you thought the Colorado win, honestly.
We did.
I thought maybe that it had happened. The other close wins during that 10-year period, Michigan State one was in 2015. That's too early, I think, right, to say it brings you out of this whole thing. The Scott Frost Michigan State win in 2018. It's a close win, but you can't really feel the momentum of it for the next year.
Correct.
Right?
Well, they lose to Iowa that year, and then Colorado happens the next year, and then everything kind of changes.
Yeah, I guess. So I'm just wondering what was the stretch where they got closest to coming out of it?
In hindsight, it maybe is too easy of an answer, but you look at the end of 2015, you mentioned the Michigan State game a moment ago. They beat Michigan State, they beat Rutgers, they lose to Iowa, they win the bowl game against UCLA, and then they start 7-0. And so they have this stretch, Jack, where they go, 10-1 over the course of 11 games.
Right.
And yet then, what happens at the end of it? How does it end? Well, they lose to Wisconsin, and that game is number 11 on our list, and it's a game that you have still championed as it should be. In the top 5, closer to the top 5?
Yeah, it's in my top 10.
And why is that? Because that's one of those fireworks games that you were talking about. That game of all of the losses of the last decade, the 2016 Wisconsin one, in my opinion, is the best example of opportunity loss.
Right.
They win the division mathematically if the rest of the season plays out like it did, where they lose to Iowa, they lose to Ohio State, they win the division because they're 10-2. They only have 2 losses in the conference, and so they have a better record than Iowa. They have a better record than Wisconsin. So they do that. What happens if they win the division in year 2 under Mike Riley? Does he feel more emboldened to push back against Eichhorst and not fire his defensive coordinator?
Yeah.
Does Eichhorst even come to him with that idea? They play a Penn State team that was really good but had some flaws Is there a world where they win that game? I don't think so, but Jack, we're viewing the Mike Riley era way different if he got them back to a conference championship game in year 2 and he overcame the demon of Wisconsin on the road in overtime nonetheless.
Yeah, probably. Although, Bill Callahan got fired the year after going to a conference championship game.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it would or not, but that does make me realize as I listen to these, the other thing I often think about, Josh, is just literally, I won't know if hundreds is the word, but almost 100 moments, small little things that you could flip. A made field goal instead of a missed field goal, right? An extra inch gain on a first down, and not an interception not thrown. There's all of these places within these 10 years that you change one of those things and it feels like it could have a huge impact.
Yeah.
I bet we could go through and we could make a top 25 list easily of 25 moments, little moments that if they went the other way, and I mean like something. A play or a flag not thrown or whatever, that could have significantly changed the trajectory of Husker football, which is unbelievable.
Well, along those lines, as we've gotten closer to the top, we've talked about these games more from the loss perspective and not from kind of the opportunity lost if they would have win perspective. A game that was a little lower and it was in the 40s was the game against Ohio State last year. That's a game where, it hurt, right? But it hurts less because of how it happened and more because of the chance of like what it could have meant. I remember you and I doing the pregame show that morning last October, and you said, like, if they win this game, they are still in the playoff mix, technically, and they would have obviously locked up a bowl berth. That's just one game, but if they win that, do they lose to UCLA? Do they lose to USC?
Right.
Do they lose? Like, what does that mean? And that's, as a way that we can kind of spin this forward now, like, have they come out of it? Have they come out of it yet? And is that game against Boston College, of all teams, in the bowl game the one that we look back on and we say, because you said it in the lead up to the end of that game last December, here comes the special teams mistake, and then it did, and suddenly it looked like, oh my gosh. And I don't know where that game ultimately would have ranked. It wouldn't have been near the top probably, but it would have been a blown opportunity for Nebraska, certainly.
That's interesting. You should project...
Put in all the math.
You should project Boston College. Why do I always say Rutgers in that game? Boston College scoring on that last drive. You simulate it out, whatever would be realistic, and then plug it in the formula and see where it would have went.
Well, they would have that would have been a blown game for Nebraska in terms of a really high second half winning percentage and an overall winning. They dominated that game. They were up 20-2 at one point in time.
Yep. And everybody hates Boston College, so the rivalry factor is way high.
We would have given them a 10 out of 10 on the opponent rating.
Oh boy, yeah. That's interesting, and I don't ask that to like say, well, to crap on the game, but just to say, I think I've had this theory that they have to come out on the other end of that type of a game,
and they did,
and they did, and I can say, well, they had the typical special teams stuff, and they had the typical, and they had Raiola, you get that penalty right at the time, which I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, and then all of that, but. Maybe that was what it took, right? Maybe, because I don't know if you have another game in that series, in that decade that fits the script up to a point and then Nebraska goes the other way, right? I wouldn't say the Michigan State 2015 game does, or the Oregon 2016 game does, or probably even that 2018 Michigan State 9-6 win. It doesn't, maybe that Michigan State 9-6 one, but... Like, could any of the wins that they did get in this time, did they ever really dodge a groin kick, so to speak?
Well,
right?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, like, I don't know.
Did they convert in the situation we said they never converted in? That's my question. Yeah, and I don't fully have the answer. I'm kind of thinking through the wins at this time where that might have been the case. And I don't know. Close wins. Again, that Michigan State 2018 one is the one that kind of sticks out to me, but maybe there are others.
Yeah, because in a lot of the times where they won games, like sometimes they almost lost them, and so it would have maybe been a bad loss from the, wow, how did you blow that game perspective? But they didn't really, a lot of the wins do not have the hallmarks of a lot of these games.
I know when one is. 20. Now I got to get the years right. You're better at being quick with these years than I am. 2019 Northwestern.
We did that for a McCallum game. Yeah. That was a bad. That was a bad win. They got the win, but that was ugly.
But they made the field goal.
They did.
Right?
They did.
They made the field goal. They got a key interception. That is one where that would have been a growing, that was going down the path, and they avoided it.
And what's wild is they win that game, they move to 4-2, and then they win one game the rest of the year. So it's like,
it's my theory that it just takes one is kind of ruined by that.
We would agree at that moment in time, we still didn't really recognize this as an era. Like I think it was later that year that you first started saying this is the groin kick era. And there's that tweet that we used along the way where you were like, scholars will point to the 2015 range. And you were right. Yeah. But like it took us years, I think, to really start defining it as starting in 2015 until now, they have been going through this very specific thing. Like this is, Jack, the first offseason that in the rule era specifically where they are really leaning into one-score wins. Like they have to find a way. I guess last year they did call a documentary Chasing Three, so maybe they leaned into it. But I have noticed a lot more conversation from everybody about they got to find a way to win these one-score games because they keep losing in horrific fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose. Penn State 2020?
That was one that I was thinking of because they were up huge and then they almost blew it in that game. Penn State slowly crawled back. Nebraska won that game by 7 points. Yeah, that was one of them that came in my mind.
Or maybe even the Minnesota game 2018, the game that Frost finally did get for his first one. That
was going to mean something.
I don't know if that was quite going down the road of being one of the top groin kick games. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to me when we evaluate at the end of this thing. What does the end of it look like? Are we at the end of it? How many false endings did we have? Did we really have false endings?
Yeah,
right? That's what's interesting to me.
It's a good question. And so we have now reached the end of it. And so that is the question. Will they be able to come out of it? I mean, there's like this sick part of me that kind of wants them to play in a close game against Cincinnati in the opener later this month just to see what's going to happen. On the other hand, I know everyone hearing that is saying, please, God, no. That sounds scary as hell. I would rather not have to deal with my, heart beating out of my chest for 3 hours.
Josh, I said that exact thing about the 2023 game against Minnesota even.
And they did play
it then. And I was like, I'd rather have them overcome a close game just to get over the groin kick era when Scott Frost was there. And I got it, and they didn't do it.
No, they didn't.
And it was one of the big ones.
That game ended up very, very high on the list. It ended up at number 10. That game against Minnesota.
Rightfully
that was the highest ranked of all of the Minnesota
I think I had
losses.
it higher. Rightfully so.
And it was a great representation of it because if they're able to hold on, they played not well that night and they still very much could have won the game and then they didn't. It's what makes this upcoming season just so interesting. That we have gone through this every offseason. You and I are talking about like, what do you remember about last year and what is it going to mean? I don't know if I've ever done such a deep dive into the previous season than I was able to do this offseason because of this project that you and I have undertaken.
Yeah. Okay. And so what's your thought about it after that, after taking a deeper look at what happened last year and how it impacts how you look at this coming year?
Well, certainly I am. If you're wanting to be glass half full, I would say, look, the game against Boston College was one that in the last decade they would have lost many times because it had the hallmarks, as you said, and I know we keep going back to the special teams blunder, but that really kicked things off. And after that, it was like they're going to do it again.
But absolutely, what happens if that is a typical groin kick era game is they can't get the first downs to run out the clock and they punt then you know what happens next?
They're going to go and score,
and then all of a sudden the defense doesn't look like they did.
Correct.
Because the defense had looked good for the vast majority of that game,
as they always do.
And
in so many of these games, the defense looked so good.
I mean, we can all tell exactly how it would happen. How many games did you talk about on this thing where it looked like Nebraska was just going to be able to run time, right? Run the clock and either set up a game-winning field goal or just run out the game, whatever it is, or any of those things, and you would set it up in these. This situation where you would say, well, I'm just thinking of the Minnesota, or I just listened to the Wisconsin 2015 one again, like the amount of time that they had just to run out the clock after the missed field goal.
After the missed field goal.
2015. There were umpteen of those situations where they should have if they get a first down, it's over. And that's what differentiated what happened in the Pinstripe Bowl is they got the first down. They got the first downs that they needed, and they were able to run out the clock.
Let me ask you this one more, kind of a different way to ask this question. Because you said, like, have they gotten out of it? And the answer, of course, is we don't know at this point in time. Do they need one of these wins to come against Iowa, against Minnesota, because I'm looking at the schedule this year, and I'm thinking of the schedule. Colorado is gone, right? Like, Colorado meant something last year, but of course it wasn't a one-score game. Wisconsin is off the schedule this year, so you're not going to be able to beat them. Do they need it to come against a team not named Boston College? You know, that ultimately you feel something about, or if they do it against Cincinnati, or if they do it against, Michigan, which we've talked about multiple times today. Michigan State is on the schedule this year. Maryland 2023 was very high on the list. Like, is it okay if it happens this year against one of the non-Minnesota Iowa matchups? You're saying
getting that type of ugly groin kick avoidance win, but against a specific set of teams.
Correct.
Namely those who are most common and most commonly in our list.
Correct.
And highest ranked on our list. Because the ones we were even talking about during the era, we mentioned Michigan State twice, which, they were in there once significantly, but not a ton. The win they did get against Iowa under Mickey, that was a Mickey Joseph thing. Could you argue that was a groin kick avoidance in that game? Because they started, that definitely was, actually.
Jack, remember when they fumbled the ball?
The best one.
Yes, remember when they fumbled the ball at the end of the game and Iowa gets it and you're like, there's no way they're going to win this game now.
It feels like you lose the continuity a little bit because it's the end of a season, last game of a season, and you're switching coaching staffs.
Yeah.
Like,
in a way, it's kind of hilarious that they won that game because it kind of falls through the cracks because what happens not even 24 hours later.
Yeah. You know what, Josh? Based on this conversation, here's how I would design it. The game that feels, because you haven't quite hit it in any of these ones that we've brought up when there was a win that looked like it flipped the script on the groin kick. All of them were either happening, in a way that it didn't quite match the script that we're talking about, or in a game that didn't matter, or the opponent didn't matter as much, or was at the very end of a season and the momentum was muted because of it. See Iowa 2022, see Michigan State 2018.
Yeah.
Maybe what they need is these elements. That type of a game, going down the groin kick path and then flipping the script, going to overtime, getting a first down. Another team missing a field goal, a game-winning field goal at the very end.
Yep.
Running out the clock successfully. Whatever. Where there is, it's not just that they win a close game, it's that the oh shit moment happens and you overcome it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Like you did against Boston College. The block punt was that.
Yeah.
So you have that, number one. Number two, as you pointed out, you have it against an opponent that has been a thorn in your side, where it feels like they've got what I think of Sooner magic.
Correct.
Back in the 80s.
And Iowa has very much developed Hawkeye magic.
You've had a Hawkeye magic. You've had Badger magic.
Yeah.
You've
Gopher magic.
You've had Buff magic and Gopher magic.
Northwestern is in the top 20
Wildcat
multiple
magic.
times.
Right. So that's number two. But then here's my third one. I think it's got to happen at a time when there's enough season remaining and there's enough hope remaining
that you can parlay it into something.
That you can parlay it into momentum. That is meaningful momentum. And those three things, that's not happened in the entire decade with a win.
No.
Right?
No.
Unless, I'm trying to think of this.
Depending on how you want to view Oregon 2016, but as we cut, that season is just kind of such an outlier. But
you could argue 2016 is too early to say you were having to get over a mental hump.
Certainly haven't had that in the Matt Rule era so far.
It's in the era, but I think what you said earlier is it took probably until 2018, 2019 till Scott Frost was there, because you just thought of it as a Mike Riley thing.
Correct.
Right?
And now we have learned it's not a Mike Riley thing, it's not a Scott Frost thing, it's not a Matt Rule thing, it is a Nebraska thing.
So if you can get all three of those things, and people say, well, Jack, what about the Colorado game in 2024? Well, I didn't really have the groin kick script, right? It was great, and it certainly could have been something I thought they were going to build momentum off, and they did to a degree, but it needs, I think, to be one of those games where it was close at the end, and they overcame it, right? It overcame the lost hope and the oh no, here we go again situation. You were never like that against Colorado. It was such a party.
Correct.
From the beginning.
The whole time.
From the whole thing.
Well, you said something there as we now wrap up. You said overtime. You want to talk about through lines of this whole project. 0-8, negative yardage in total in the overtime games, 0 first downs, 0 points. They have not won a single one of those games. If they go to overtime, and this is one where I'd say I don't care who the team is. If they go to overtime against Cincinnati, if they go to overtime against Michigan State, against Maryland, against Penn State, whatever it is, and they're able to finally overcome that stuff, I mean, that is warranting of many fireworks.
So you think just in winning one overtime might be enough?
I really think it could be. But I love the way that you laid it out. You had 3 categories, and I think the last one that you hit on is a really good one. Use it to build off of.
And you look at this coming schedule, and you try and identify where that is. If you're not using your standard just of overtime, it's not Cincinnati, right?
Michigan.
It's not Houston Christian.
Michigan.
It's Michigan.
Yep. It certainly would be the Michigan game.
It's Michigan, and there was only one Michigan game that was really high in the Groin Kick Chronicles, and that's the 2021 game, because there just weren't any others that were particularly close.
They were really bad otherwise.
They were really bad, and so I don't know if but they're on there. They're a conference team. They're a hated team. They're one that you would take particular pleasure in beating. Yep. There would be a lot of fireworks just for the fact of beating them, and so that's the first one when I think of next year's schedule, and you have the whole season in front of you.
Yeah.
If you want to exercise the most possible Groin Kick Chronicles demons, Groin Kick era demons, you win that Michigan. If I could script it, you win that Michigan game in overtime after overcoming what looked like an oh shit moment.
So that is the end. The Groin Kick Chronicles. All these episodes, all these hours, all these lowlights, all these brutal losses, and now we ask, can the era end as well? You did a Reverse the Curse event before the 2022 season. That wasn't a good year. They went 4-8, but right. You did one. But you named it that going in, that we're going to reverse the curse. Perhaps this can be that.
Maybe.
In its own sick, twisted way. You have to bury everything, but you have to talk about it first.
Listen.
We talked about it plenty.
People have speculated about our motivations for doing this, but that's certainly one of mine, is that I think I am putting the last bit of dirt on this by fully reliving it, fully getting it out of my system, and then moving on with this whole thing. And that's what I hope to do once this season starts. And I desperately, Josh, do not want to get done with that Cincinnati game.
Oh, boy. And have people tweeting at us, hey, where would this game rank on the Chronicle ranking?
I have 0. I'm done. I've had enough of this for my life.
Yep.
It's taken years off of my life, this era. It's unbelievable. And I'm not the only one. We've heard all the stories.
Yeah.
It's ruined relationships. It's
literally people are fighting people.
It's
breaking up
fights. It's had spouses and significant others angry at each other for long periods of time. It's probably sent people to jail. It's probably made them do things they otherwise wouldn't. We
say things you regret. Sent many tweets that you regret.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
Say, tweet things you regret. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. For all of our own good, for the economy, for everyone's collective...
For podcast downloads.
For everyone's collective mental health, all of those things, physical health, we need it to end.
The Groin Kick Chronicles come to an end. We hope the Groin Kick era comes to an end as well.
Yes.
Jack, thanks for the kernel of the idea. Thanks for naming this what you did, and thanks for being here throughout the process.
And by the way, if it ends, we did it.
You're welcome, everybody.
You're welcome.
The Groin Kick Chronicles were recorded at Make Believe Studios. Score, engineering, and production by Ian Aeillo. Video production by Ian Aeillo and Mike Stibbs. Special thanks to Matt Connolly, Eric Reidelbach, Jordan Schmidt, and the I-80 Club for their input on putting together the formula that became the Groin Kick Rating. For more from the I-80 Club, including bonus episodes, everything from Volleyball State during the 2025 season and more, subscribe to the Patreon for as low as $5 a month. Patreon.com/I-80 Club. To see highlights, lowlights, and Groin Kick ratings for each and every game, head to HuskerMax.com or hit up the link in the show notes. The Groin Kick Chronicles are an I-80 Club original podcast.